Welcome, everyone. Really excited to be here to talk about navigating the complex customer review landscape. And I'm joined by one of my favorite people, Leslie Paterson, who is a very talented marketer, just an all-around amazing person, has a ton of experience and expertise in this space. So Leslie, welcome. So excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I always love talking with you.
Yeah, this will be really fun. And so you're joining us from Dallas, Texas. Maybe you can give the audience a little bit about yourself and your career.
Yeah, so I've been in customer advocacy and customer engagement for a long time. I often say it's more years than I care to admit, or that I definitely hit the med spa to be in denial with, because it adds up over time. But yeah, I started in advocacy way back. In the 90s, and have been doing it for a while, seen a lot happen, going from, buyers being intelligent through just having conversations with reps to, more of that digital engagement to now really having the resources to make an educated buying decision, really from sitting in a chair that they sit in every day. So it's been a pretty dramatic change over the past few decades, but it's been a really fun role to have the view to see. So had a chance to do this from a few different purviews in different organizations, from CA to went over in the channel space and worked at Ingram Micro for a while. Got to get to know the indirect area from the distribution lens, and then over to Oracle for quite some time, and then Genesis, and now I'm at BMC Software. So based in Dallas, yes. And last week, if we would have done, or no, 2 weeks ago, there would have been snow in the background, which is very rare for Dallas. Wow. So my daughter's head exploded with snow. So.
Right. And you also recently just got a puppy.
Oh, yes, we have a puppy. Yeah, so we have 2 dogs. I'm a dog person. I always say sometimes I like people's dogs more than the people. But no, we have a 4-year-old chocolate lab named Kimber, and then now we have a 3-month-old chocolate lab, and her name is Remington. We call her Remy. So we're very busy, and I don't get all nights of sleep anymore. So, but it's fun.
Yeah, well, that makes it more fun, right? Well, awesome. Like, just you rattling off the companies that you've been to, the career that you have, and how much change that you've seen, especially across the enterprise and navigating a really complex review. So tell me, as you think about your career and how the customer review kind of industry has changed, what are kind of like the standouts to you over the last decade?
Yeah, well, it's funny because if I think back, 10 years ago, perhaps even, I don't know that the reviews necessarily caught my eye when I was looking at putting together the strategy for how we get the customer's voice out there. And so they weren't a priority or even really on my radar. And I remember it was back when I was at Oracle. I remember we were hearing, and I was in a customer engagement role. So my job was to get to know the customers that I was assigned to, build relationships with them, work hand in hand with the account teams to really make sure we've got the customer's best interest at heart while still amplifying their voice as an advocate. And I remember being asked to, hey, take a look at, if you can get some of your customers to leave reviews. And I was like, you mean like a Yelp? What are you talking about? So I went from that level of knowledge to, really getting familiar with, okay, what purpose can the reviews serve? Not just from an education perspective, but also from a lead gen perspective. But then also to, really educating the, that from the analyst community. I see a lot of consumption of review materials and review feedback when, we meet with analysts and speak with analysts. So I think it's gone from from being, serving one purpose to now I feel like I'm seeing it serve numerous purposes and really putting that customer in the driver's seat. So, you look at even since COVID, right? Gartner changed their MQs to where now they, for the customer validation, everything's on GPI instead of necessarily doing the phone calls. Just massive changes like that, I think gave a amplification to the validity that the review sites have in that buyer's journey. So.
Yeah, and if you think, we do a lot of our research and you see that most of the buying power out there are millennials. And so millennials grew up in a digital age. They grew up with social. They grew up reading reviews in B2C. And so now that's really transcended into the B2B world and becoming so influential and being this, source of original content from your customers. And so it's really interesting to see how that is kind of influencing other areas. So when you think about,
can I double in on that? Because you brought up something interesting, which is the age of the buyer persona, because it has changed from what it was. And I think with that change, that introduced a little bit of skepticism in the more traditional marketing tactics. I feel as though that, especially that millennial or more digitally sound buyer, is not necessarily one to see an ad and go, oh, well, hot dang, I'm going to go to their website and get smart. I feel like there's a little bit more of that skepticism. So I actually see that the role of the reviews being even more critical for that particular buying audience.
So when you were, when you think about your career and how you're building out like this kind of review program, what were the criteria? Because if you think about now, there's so many different review platforms. There's so many ways that you can go about this. Like, what's the criteria of thinking about which platforms to work with and why?
Yeah. So it's funny. I feel like I have this conversation internally often too, but I am a big believer that review sites can serve a number of different purposes. And if you're going to get engaged with them, it's typically not something that you do for a zero cost. So if you're going to put your money behind it, it should be something where you're going to get much more benefit out of it than just like one-line reviews, which is one of the big benefits I see. And one of the reasons why I keep partnering with Trust Radius is because y'all have this beautiful long form review that, quite frankly, I feel like if I put myself in the seat of a buyer, you can get so much smarter based upon reading just a few reviews that are long form versus you could read, 50 or 100 that are short form. And I don't know that necessarily would address the questions that you might have as a buyer in the order with which you might have them, right? So I think taking a look at who your persona are, who you want to get engaged, who you want to educate is huge. And then, understanding, okay, volumes, how do you want to get, how can you get as broad as you can? And then my other big thing that I like to do is serve multiple purposes. So if I can take the content that we have on review sites and use it in a lot of different places, that's where I'm going to get a better return on that investment. So.
Yeah. And you talked a little bit about, GPI and how you kind of are balancing that, especially within the enterprise. And I think, a big piece of this is like your audience, right? They're each of these kind of review sites kind of has their own audience. And so how do you think about balancing that and where you're kind of, okay, BMC, we need to invest here, here, and here, because these are where our eyeballs are. And then how do you kind of manage that internally?
It's funny because it's not a really easy answer, especially here at BMC, because we have 3 different business units. And that means 3 very different buying personas, even within a single account. So if you go and look at an enterprise account that's a BMC customer that, say, has products from all 3 BUs, you're going to have 3 very, very different personas that make those buying decisions. So not all you can necessarily steer into the same platform to get smart in. So our strategy varies based upon the business unit and the buyer persona that we're going after. And I would say it's also just being here. I'm in May, I'll have been here for 2 years. I feel as though it's evolved a bit also, just by doing some education within BMC of what all's out there and why I'm a big believer in some of the platforms that I've experienced and seen benefit from in the past. So, which is why I always like that outside in voice into an organization. So.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting when you're thinking about managing, like one, I guess, at BMC or Genesis or Oracle, was it hard to have like a multi-review platform strategy? And like, why would somebody do that in the first place? And then if that is your strategy, how do you kind of maintain that kind of consistency or manage, your resources across platforms?
Yeah, so it's not always easy. But no, it's what I would say is one of the things that I give a lot of credit to the leadership here at BMC is because when I brought up the challenge of, hey, we have this scramble moment before every MQ happens where it's all, it's kind of like dumping out a bowl of marbles and everyone's scrambling around, and God forbid, you might bump into each other in front of a customer asking for a review in order to look good on, say, a GPI platform for an MQ. That shouldn't be the strategy. Getting the voice of your customer and harnessing that in a way that's meaningful to their peer community should be an always on strategy. So when in speaking with our leadership, when I was saying, hey, I really need to have a program manager for the peer reviews, because what that means to the business is this is the opportunity to get in front of buyers that haven't even hit our .com yet. We don't even know who they are in some cases. And this is the chance to make the decision in their minds as to whether or not they're going to click on our website or not. And they were fully in support of that. So one of the things we do is we have someone on within my group that she is totally focused on knowing, who the sites are that we are on, what the reviews are looking like, what's the trending look like. And then part of her other job is making sure that we are tightly aligned with the solutions marketing and product marketing teams within the business units. The worst thing I think that could ever happen on a review site is for someone to ask a question of a vendor and that question not to be addressed. I think that's just, that should never happen. So one of the things that we are always doing is making sure that we have a point of contact within each of the business units that we know we can go to say, okay, hey, we got a question about this. I need an answer like ASAP on this. We can't leave the customer hanging. And so that's part of that always on strategy. But the other piece is always trying to find new avenues to uncover where we might have the ability to add the request for leaving a review of our customer community. So, when I was at Genesis, we tapped into our professional services organization, realizing, these individuals that are out on site, implementing the software, they could have anywhere from 5 to 50 contacts that they have spent, several months getting to know really well. They could go out and make one request and boom, you've got some volume right there. So we partnered with PS to do that. Also partnering with education. When a customer goes through an education course and they finish that course, they are not only are they wicked smart about the solution, but typically they're deeply engaged and they feel vested in what they've spent time getting to know and learn. So that's another great lead source. We just actually this week uncovered another one here at BMC that we didn't even really realize was happening, and it was around a webinar series. And here we've got this amazing now database to go and outreach to of highly engaged customers who are spending time on a monthly basis on these webinars. And so just constantly having that, someone watching, where are there opportunities to get even broader with our customers? We also always have, we have our customer community, our advocacy community that we run on Influitive. That community it's a collection of hand raisers. So we're whenever we have a need for, whether it's an MQ or we've got a campaign going that we want to beef up support through reviews for, we can tap into that community as well. So.
Yeah, I think you're really touching on a point where it's always on. And I also think that you're touching on a really good point too on this kind of quality piece where you're always thinking about this. You're not trying to scramble at the last minute, but you're also thinking about, okay, where are these moments in time throughout the customer journey that it makes sense for us to ask for this review to get their feedback? It's really interesting. When we do research with buyers, most buyers only really read 3 to 5 reviews. And the thing that they care about the most is that they're reading a review that is from somebody like them. So we want to read from somebody like, that's a marketer, that's at a, company my size, maybe my sophistication level, and then the content. So I think you're really hitting on a good point when you think about managing multiple review platforms and kind of getting away from this volume play where like I need thousands and thousands of reviews, where actually it's like I just need really good quality reviews from our customer base. So we have, our customers that are going to find our next best customers, right?
100%. No, I actually have a super really okay, I'm gonna go totally rogue on you, Allison, but this is why we get along. So I was looking for a new work laptop bag, and I'm on the website and I'm looking at these reviews of this one that I thought I wanted, and all the reviews were just not that helpful. And then I get to this site that has these amazingly rich reviews, and I'm like, oh, and instantly I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like me. Oh, and she said this about it. I couldn't, and it was not, we all know laptop bags aren't exactly free 99. So it wasn't like I was, just put it in the cart and go. I wanted to think about it, but that really helped me go from the educating to buying. And it was because of the reviews. It wasn't necessarily because of the pictures on the website and the description. It was the reviews. And it was things like, oh, it was nice that there were pockets, but not so many pockets that you forget what you put in there, which is the reason why I'm looking for a new bag right now, because my bag has too many pockets. And I'm like, wait, when did I have 5 bags of Kleenex in here? And I didn't know that I had 3 chapsticks. And, so it helps you become much more educated. And I think it takes that buying decision, and it could be the fuel that gets you closer to the decision to buy than just still window shopping.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have to send me that bag, because I think right now I use like
a beach. You're going to want it.
Like I'm embarrassed. I'm on the plane with like a beach bag, like just throwing my laptop, all my stuff in there, and like everything's a mess. And so I'll have to take some notes. I think what you're touching on, which is really important and kind of is a great segue, is like buyer trust. And I think right now, and you talked about it earlier around skepticism, right? We see it all the time. You're a consumer. It's like we all buy technology. We're really skeptical of looking at that picture, or we're looking at that marketing collateral or that website. And we're, and if you think about the oversaturation in terms of the technology industry, it's really hard to differentiate. And so customer voice and that like kind of genuine content out there is so valuable to build that buyer trust, build that confidence to actually get them over the line for a purchase. Mm-hmm. And, we follow very closely all like the FTC guidelines, just given how important reviews are, and the FTC is starting to take notice, especially in the B2C world, but also in B2B, where like, hey, you need to be or making sure that you're marketing something that has an incentive, which incentives are not a bad thing at all. And I want to get your opinion on this, because the way we look at it, and so that, you're kind of getting the people that probably wouldn't have left you a review. You're getting like those maybe like 3-star reviews, but those are kind of the most informative ones. And you think about the way you read reviews. And then the second piece is that, the cherry picking and trying to keep those unbiased reviews, because if you just have a bunch of 5-star reviews, no one's going to believe you,
No
right?
one.
Like, not building that trust. So, when you think about your strategy and, maintaining that level of transparency, unbiased, like, how are you kind of thinking about that and, getting that message across to your organization? Because I know every executive wants that 5-star review.
Well, it does. And I think the education of exactly what you just touched on is not an easy one, especially at your ELT level. But I think that one thing that, well, there's a few different ways that I look at this. Number one, I like to have a mix, like you said, because if everything's just 5-star reviews, I mean, I'm sorry. The last thing I saw when I was on Amazon buying something and it was like, all 5-star reviews. I'm like, Riri, is it though? And it made me skip past that product, right?
Right.
I agree with you. I go for the 3-star reviews. So case in point, I was telling you earlier, I just booked a little mini ski vacation with my daughter and I was on Airbnb looking for the place to stay. And instead of going to the 5-star reviews, I went to the ones that were 4 and 3-star reviews because I wanted to understand, was their challenge something that would be relatable to me, or was it unique to them? Or was it a point in time? Maybe, the condo was brand new and they were having electrical issues. And oh, yeah, by the way, this is in 2022. I'm sure they've resolved it by now. And I actually made my decision based upon the reviews that were more, that were not the 5-star, hey, it was great. Everything was great. I want to know, are the beds going to be soft or are they going to be hard as rocks? Because after a day of skiing, I don't want to lay on a Fred Flintstone bed. Is there going to be a private hot tub or am I going to have to share it with people I really don't want to be sitting next to? So I think just having that, being able to tell that angle. And as you can tell, I like to weave stories into the points that I want to make. And I try and do that also with our ELT because instantly it becomes relatable, and relatability is something that I think is the key to reviews. But I think also just knowing your audience, knowing your persona, knowing the actual people who you've asked to leave a review is huge. Like I'm a fan of the FTC ruling. I think it's a smart move, and I think it's quite frankly was necessary a little while before it happened. And because I think that if you think about it, you want that review that's truly a real person who's relatable, who's like me, who's giving their true feedback. The other thing that I also love to do, as you at Trust Radius know, when we have an event, I love doing in-person reviews. I mean, it doesn't get any more real or, than that, especially if you're doing, the video review or sitting there right there with them, hearing their, feedback.
Mhm.
I think that is huge. And you tend to get much more rich reviews out of that too. So,
Yeah. So I was just looking, we have some really, really great questions in the chat. And so I'm going to try to sum up some of these into a few questions. So one was around the enterprise segment. There was a few questions around that. When you think about, which review sites have an enterprise audience, which ones are those? And then kind of as follow-up to that is, how do you audit review sites and like how strong they are like in a particular category? Again, I think that's a really good question because a lot of review, there's kind of like, oh, they might have a lot of traffic to their site or eyeballs, but is it actually really good for your particular category? So that's kind of a two-part question. Where do you really invest for the enterprise, and then how do you audit, making sure that review site is strong in your category?
Yeah. So as far as where we invest in enterprise, I have doubled down, as you know, with Trust Radius, because when I know the persona that I am going for, and it's leaning more toward that decision maker and up persona. And what I have seen over the years, especially is you look at some of the other review sites that are out there, I think that there's been some changes and some evolution, if you will, in their strategy.
Mhm.
Some are, started out maybe very healthy and now are leaning way more into a demand gen tool versus necessarily a buyer education tool. So I think that enterprise space, depending on the persona, if you really want to hit that decision maker and up, that's one of the reasons why I keep partnering with y'all at Trust Radius. But if you're wanting to get that practitioner, one of the ones that any vendor will tell you, you have to have a presence on if you want to have your product reviewed and placed well in the market, is the Gartner Peer Insights. You get
Mhm.
a lot of practitioner traffic on the GPI platform. As far as it's interesting. Coming to BMC, we learned of another review site that was very, very nuanced to that particular data automation persona.
Mhm.
And it was one that hadn't even really hit my radar. So just getting to know, who is that buyer persona, who's, whose voices do you want to capture? And again, don't just capture them for the masses. Volume's one thing, but the real true insights and feedback for the optimal relatability, that's what you're going for.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, That's why I was saying earlier, it's the strategy is it's really unique to each of the buyer personas we're going for within each of the 3 business units we have.
Right. And we kind of touched on this a little bit, but there's another kind of two-part question for you. Is okay, so you kind of built this strategy and then you're getting these reviews. Okay, one, how do you respond to maybe a negative review, or
Mhm.
you said you like this, it's almost like a two-way conversation. So that's one. And then, maybe a lot of that is like product feedback that you're getting, right? Maybe a little bit of customer success or support, etc. But how do you essentially, one, respond, and then two, how do you get that information back into your organization?
Yeah. So number one, the response has to happen,
Yes.
whether it's good, bad, or ugly. You
Right.
have to acknowledge that voice. Otherwise, that voice very easily and very just the human nature will turn into a negative voice
Mhm.
and could get very loud. So I think just acknowledging it is huge. As far as getting the feedback, if it does get into more of a product nuanced, either Q and A or the review is very product nuanced. We again, the program manager on our team, if we see that, we'll funnel it back into either the product space or back into the community space. So, if we have a customer community site or even our collective, that's the name of our advocacy platform, into that environment. So I think, but you look, if you're going to go and invest in a review site strategy, one of the things that I would never do this without having someone having eyes on those sites, understanding who the personas are, having the contacts within the product teams, as well as outside of there, if you're looking for new review avenues, right, to tap into. I wouldn't do it without someone focused on that anymore, because it very quickly can snowball into a scenario where you have latency in the reviews, so you don't have that always on steady drip that really you need, but you also could have a complete almost like crickets to questions that come up or issues that people have, and I think that will do more of a disservice than anything.
Yeah. And I think, when you're responding, like just the acknowledgement is so, so important. And then you kind of, one thing that I think about as well, and you kind of mentioned this, is like you kind of can see these core themes that could pop up in your reviews. And how do you bring that into a way where it doesn't feel like it's like, hey, this one person is complaining about one product feature, right? You can start to find maybe aggregates of, hey, we're really falling short. We've had multiple reviews mention our support system, or we've had multiple people ask for this type of product feature. There's power in numbers. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think when you're bringing back information from your reviews into your organization, it's about finding like the themes, and then bringing that back in a very productive way versus, hey, we had this horrible review, what should we do about it, type
Mm-hmm.
of.
They have to be actionable insights for sure. And then
Yeah,
there has to be, again, that program manager to follow up on those actionable insights.
yeah,
Because it's one thing to go and say, hey, here's what we heard in consensus to a particular, functionality of a product, and take it into the product space. And then it's like a black hole. Nothing happens. There's no
right.
feedback. There has to be that loop of feedback to the customers.
Yeah,
Absolutely has to be.
right.
To me, it's just general respect for the
Yes,
fact that they left their voice. I'm going to respect you by listening and responding and reacting, right?
yeah,
If someone's taken the time to do that, because we all have a lot going on, and to go and take the time to leave a review, whether it's positive or negative, that's still time out of your day. That's your personal capital. And if someone's going and doing that for a product of BMC's, we want to acknowledge them. I think that's just the right thing to do.
100%. And I think, I mean, you just made so many good points on that of just the respect and then also using that information. And again, like your customers, at the end of the day are the most important thing. And so you're doing reviews are a really good way to get that feedback at scale.
Mm-hmm. They are. They are. And we always say, now on my team, the minute we take that customer's voice or time with Callus, we are doing ourselves a massive disservice. We might as well find new jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So another really good question. What are your thoughts on reviews versus ratings on review sites? I think this is great in the sense of like, okay, how much do buyers, look at the score versus looking at the reviews? And how do you manage that?
It depends on the buyer, depends on the
Mhm.
persona. I
Yeah.
think a true decision maker and up is going to look at a score and say, okay, what made up that score? The negative plus the positive, right? Kind of like if you go back to the, finding a condo to go skiing in. I was a serious buyer. I mean, I'm literally like, well, hot damn, if I don't book this place, my airline tickets are going to go up threefold. And this little ski vacation is going to turn into a whopper before I know it. I've got to go and make a decision quickly. So I think it depends on who that persona is. If it's truly a decision maker and up, they're going to go more into the review and the fabric of that review versus just a score. If you've got someone who's just kind of window shopping and they're not serious, I think that they're more focused on the score necessarily. And look, scores are great. Volume is good, but I'm really going for that decision maker audience. So I want the fabric of the long form review.
Yeah. And we see that in our research when the one of the lowest, actually two of the lowest scoring things that actually matter to a buyer were aggregated product scores and awards. Now
Hmm.
we all know that as a vendor, we love scores and
We
we love
like our shiny objects.
there's a big disconnect there. But I think it goes back to like we've been conditioned to think that way, like we have to get these scores. And I think you've made a really, really good point, Leslie, that I think this audience should really understand is the difference between a window shopper and a serious buyer that's trying to make a decision. And
Mhm.
sure, the score is a signal, but they're going to dive deep into your reviews and they're going to try to get as much information as possible. They're going to look at like, hey, are people using this product that are like me at a company like mine? And so I think it goes back to those principles of the quality, the recency, and the type of customer that you're trying to attract. And the other things are more vanity in my
Mhm.
opinion too.
I fully agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it also goes into knowing who that person is you've asked to leave a review, right?
Yeah.
If you know that they have a perspective that quite frankly is highly relatable to others, or that you can make a logical assumption is highly relatable to others, that review is going to be worth more in the, you know, the context of the review than just a number score.
Right. So that's a really good segue into this next kind of question I have for you. And thank you, everybody. Keep your questions. I'll try to get through as many as I can.
Are there a lot?
Yeah, there's a lot. So I'm
Are people watching this?
together. There's a lot of questions. I mean, this is a really hot topic because, again, like I think you said this at the beginning, where reviews are so important, and people are having a really hard time of like, how do I invest my resources? How do I not exhaust my customer base? How do I make sure I'm putting my best foot forward? And so I think, and again, like you have so many good insights on this, but one question I think is kind of top of mind for a lot of people in customer marketing, or a lot of people kind of in the advocacy world, is how do I tie the impact of a review program to revenue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you're talking.
The real question, the real
No, I'm a big fan of being able to say the value of something, and that value doesn't always have to be in necessarily, oh, we, you know, helped land a X dollar value deal because of a review, because there are so many things that touch especially an enterprise sales life cycle. But what I love to be able to do is to be able to say, you know, hey, we know that, say, a deal progressed perhaps a little bit faster because of the insights someone had in the buying process when they were buying. We used to do at Genesis, we did these really cool voice of the buyer surveys that it was nice because the team that did them was super collaborative with my team, and we got to go and create the questions we wanted to ask. And one of the questions we would ask is, did you visit a review site? And did that change your you know, your buying decision or influence in any way? And we purposely left that as a free text because we wanted to see what people had to say. We got some great nuggets that you could take forward to any ELT and say, hey, this is why this matters. Look at these quotes here. So I think if you have the ability to, if you have a voice of buyer program within your organization, if you have the ability to get in there and even just get one question in there, this question, if you can get it in there, especially in a free text, can validate not just the investment in the review sites that you need, but also that head count. I truly believe that you can. So, yeah.
And you said this earlier, and that it really resonated with me, is the anecdotes. Because you can show as many numbers as you want. Like, hey, you know, here's all these accounts that went and looked at our profile on Trust Radius, and then here's how much our pipeline is tied to those accounts, or closed one, et cetera. And it's like, okay. But when you tell a story with that, and you tell like your leadership team, because that leadership team is going to take that to the board meeting, they're going to take it to, you know, when they're talking on a webinar or something, like it's the anecdotes of like, we landed this deal. They, you know, they said that they read these reviews and like this got them over the line. Because we all know attribution models are a disaster. And so it's the anecdotes that could really, you know, change the perception of something.
100%. You could have, I always say, we could have the prettiest blinky light dashboard you've ever seen. Like the thing, you know, you push this, it does that, you push that, it tells you this. If you don't have a story to back a strong example, it's just a blinky light dashboard. It's not going to get you from a room full of skeptics to a room full of, yes, let's do this. Let's make this investment. So having those anecdotes and those stories, I'm the biggest fan. I love to tell stories. So I love to have examples, and clearly based upon the time that we've been talking. But yeah, no, and I think being able to understand when to weave those in, I would never lead with the story. You have to lead with, my boss always calls it facts and data. And I'm like, oh, I love facts and data too, but I also love myself a good story. So lead with the facts and data and then weave in an anecdote. So
yeah, no, that's such great advice. And like, And as marketers, like that's what we're good at. Like we're good at storytelling. So like lean into that, but you definitely still have to have the data to back that up and still show the influence that your review program is having on hard dollars. But
Mhm.
what's really going to stick in their minds is that anecdote that you have.
Absolutely. Everyone can remember a story. Not everyone can remember the win percentage or the PG number, or, I mean, after a while, it becomes, you go and look at some of these dashboards and you're like, wow, alphabet soup with a bunch of colors and numbers. I'm not going to remember a single one of them. But if you have a story you can tie to it, I guarantee that'll be remembered.
Yeah. Okay, so we're coming up at time. So I have one last question for you, and it's more just forward looking because I think, like you said at the very beginning, how much in your career the review landscape has come. If you think about you were like, I don't even what we're getting reviews on Yelp or like, and now how sophisticated your program is. That's a lot of change and not that long of time period. And I think with the way AI is ingesting data and original content and kind of spitting out these summaries, et cetera. Like there's so much change that's going to happen in the next year. So what are you thinking about? What's on your radar within your organization? And how can others kind of plan for the future when it comes to customer reviews?
I would say anytime you can be mindful of having the opportunity to better educate a buyer even before they hit your welcome mat of your .com, that's a treasure and it shouldn't be taken lightly. I love, love, love the infusion of AI into the I remember being at a meeting with Trust Radius when y'all were sharing what was happening on the future of the GPT functionality for the reviews and some of the AI and the logic behind, well, if you're looking for this would make sense too. That was music to my ears because you have to figure you only have a certain amount of time with that buyer in front of the screen that they're looking at to educate them. So if you can do so in a way that's meaningful faster through AI, do it, double down on it. I mean, we all have about the tension of span of a goldfish, right? So if it can happen fast, do it fast, and that's what AI affords us. So I'm a big fan. I love the ability to also give a rich education experience to a buyer if they're going to spend the time reading versus a one-liner. One-liners, I mean, going back to the example of Airbnb, that one liner isn't going to get me to hit buy. I went for the ones that had much more context to them, good or bad, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited to see what's going to come next. I've been really excited to see what's happened, like you said, Allison, in the short time really that the review platforms have been available. And I think that buyers, especially the more of the millennial persona buyers, they're only going to get smarter as they start doing this. So we have got to anticipate what they're going to want next when they're educating in a self-education format versus going to our website.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a great note to lean on it and end on is, you know, think about the way your buyers buy. Think about their expectations. And if they want to self serve and self educate, how do you make that just be a really great experience? Build that brand trust because that's what's going to get them over the line to purchase. And so I think that's just so smart. It's like, what are your buyers' expectations and meet them?
Well, and always put yourself in the shoes of a buyer, right?
Yep.
We're all consumers, like you said earlier. What would be helpful for you? What would be more considerate of the time that you're willing to spend educating yourself? And assume that your buyers, are need the same level of respect. So
Yeah. Yeah, that was a question. I think one of the last questions was around like, where do I get started? Think about your buyer, like always go back to your buyer persona and think about what's going to have the biggest impact the fastest. So, for instance, if we started with a review program and then from there we built the customer advisory board and then from there we think about where you can get started the fastest and where it's going to have the most impact the fastest, and then build from there.
And if you're just starting and are not sure of how, like, how do I even know who my buyer is? Get to know your product teams, get to know your sales folks, get to know your CSMs, get to know your PS folks. They're going to give you the context of who that persona is and what they care about. And you're going to get a lot of different ones, but find the ones that you can map most closely to that decision maker persona. And that's going to give you a really good starting path down the journey.
Well, Leslie, thank you. So I feel like we would probably talk about this for 2 more hours and also get a lot
I
more.
know. And like have a glass of wine while we're doing it. What?
A lot more recommendations on bags, Airbnbs.
I know. I'll send you the link.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today and your insights and sharing your expertise with our audience. We really, really appreciate it. And if you have, just feel free to reach out. Or if I didn't get to your question, we're always happy to be helpful. And like I said, this is a very complex review landscape that we're all trying to navigate. So we're here to help. So thank you, Leslie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for listening.